Hi, everybody. I am so excited to have Noa Simons joining us for one of our early podcasts. Noa had the pleasure of meeting, I think it was last week, but she's the co-founder and CEO of Good Bread, a small business lending company making $5,000 to $100,000 loans more accessible by incorporating personality, behavior, and community context into underwriting. Previously, she was president and CEO of the Upstate Capital Association of New York, where she facilitated venture and private equity investment across the region and led New York's statewide collegiate business plan competition. So welcome, Noah. Hopefully I start talking better than I am now.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
No, of course, of course. It was really nice getting to know you a little bit last week, but tell me a little about yourself and, kind of growing up and how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, well, that could either be a short story or a long story. So
We've
we'll try
got
to
time.
land somewhere in the middle. I'm sitting in Kingston, New York at the moment. I live in New Paltz, and I'm part of the Hudson Valley ecosystem here. I was born and raised just north of here in Chatham, New York, in Columbia County, but hang my hat in Ulster County these days. And you know, I've been working in and around access to capital for almost my entire career. So, in many ways, Good Bread feels like my senior thesis on my career thus far. I've had a lot of seats at around the table of being an investor, a capital provider, an entrepreneur, an advisor. And so in this moment, I'm sitting as the founder of a technology business that's backed by private capital investors. And we're building technology infrastructure to make micro lending more feasible, less expensive, more likely to succeed. And so this is a mission. It's purpose driven work for me. My dad was a small business owner when I was growing up in Hudson, and so working with Main Street businesses and making that path to entrepreneurship more successful, more effective, more likely to yield wealth, generational wealth and wealth creation. Really powerful work for me.
So how did you get into this whole line of business? You said you've been doing it most of your career.
Yeah. I have always been entrepreneurial. I had my first small business when I was a kid painting mailboxes for money. I don't know, maybe 10 or 11. And, um, and so I've always had an entrepreneurial bent. I met my venture capital mentor when I was in college. I was tutoring students as my college job to put myself through school. And uh, got to know Oliver Kerm very well through, well, being in his house many days every week and tutoring his children.
Good access.
And he offered me a job working in his family office. And so there were a couple of entrepreneurial projects that we embarked on together. And we ended up working closely where I learned the venture capital business over the course of a little over a decade. And so between the entrepreneurial starts there and then coming back to the Hudson Valley after being in Boston and China and the rest of the world, I took a couple of different things popped up. A friend of mine wanted to start a food waste recycling business where we actually did apply for a small business loan and get rejected, which was formative in some of the work I'm doing now. I helped to launch the Hudson Valley Startup Fund, which is an angel investment fund that invested over the course of a couple of funds in about 20 high growth potential companies with locations in the Hudson Valley with a presence here. And in that time, I also took over the leadership of the Upstate Capital Association of New York. And through that, I did a lot of advising small businesses and all kinds of businesses that were seeking capital, worked with a lot of capital providers up and down the capital stack, and was able through the intercollegiate entrepreneurship competition that I led understand systems work for foundations that promote and support entrepreneurship and break down some of the barriers that exist to making it possible. So I'll just say there are three, just like three things that I think about. And I thought about, because of that work, small businesses need, and businesses in general need, three things: knowledge, network, and capital. And those are like, when you sort of bring it down to like the essential resources, it's those things. And so those are the things that I'm solving for with Good Bread.
So you've been involved either on the entrepreneurial side or helping the entrepreneurs themselves. So you've seen a lot of the dark side of success.
I mean, from many angles.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me what that means to you. I mean, it's something that I've talked about for a long time, so it's nice to see someone else using that same term. But
Well, I think
what's
I might have strung those words together because of you. But I mean, I think so much of what we see on LinkedIn or Facebook or the places where we hang out on social media are the highlights, right? Like the big moments, the up moments, the and not exclusively. Some people are also sharing more deeply than that. But I think there's just a lot that we don't see. And there is and for every yes that I get, I've probably had 20 no's, and I probably didn't post about those 20 no's or talk very much about them. And some of us are more wired for those no's than others, and even if we're well wired for it, sometimes they hit harder than others because life is not linear and, you know, there's a lot of variation in the human experience. I think for me, it's reflecting on the dark side of success. What that sort of conceptually means is that we make sacrifices, right? Like there are trade offs. There are trade offs in all things in life, and I think that's a topic that is worth exploring, especially for people who are maybe considering this journey and aiming to be self reflective about it, or are on the journey and just want to commiserate. We're here for a lot of things for each other.
yeah, I mean, when you're suffering that the dark side of success, whether we're talking burnout or anxiety and stress, whether we're talking, frankly, getting depressed, it's often something that we hide, right? We mask up, and it's incredibly lonely.
Yeah. I mean, I've been there. I think probably most people have. I know on my own journey, I didn't actually embark on this journey of being a high growth entrepreneur until I had done a lot of work on understanding myself, understanding my mental and spiritual health, and spending a lot of money on therapy so that I had a lot of tools in my toolkit to be able to navigate the ups and downs that I, have had for most of my life. I'm not naturally like I am not a it's hard for me to also reflect on what it's like for other people. I know for myself, mental health is not it's also not linear. It's not and it's I think mental health is something we all have we struggle with it from time to time, different aspects of being healthy mentally and spiritually, and I do think those things are tied together, and we don't talk about that very much either because I think we don't live in a society, and especially in like the high growth startup ecosystem, where being well, truly being well as a human, is highly valued.
Yeah, so we don't talk about um wellness. We'll say we're fine, right? Like, how are you doing? I'm fine. But we don't really know what that means, or what that can possibly look like. And even the conversation around not being fine is hard to engage in.
Yeah, that's right.
So you invested a lot of time in therapy and exploration. What was that like for you?
Well, I had traveled the world and lived in a really intense, like felt high pressure life to me with just like incredible amount of jet lag and an incredible amount of input, like just a flood of input and exposure to people and places and ideas and things. And when I, when that phase of my work ended, I found myself really struggling to connect to my intuition. And and so I could feel my mind in overdrive, but I couldn't like sense the answer the way I had grown up being able to sense the answer for myself internally. And I was really good at compartmentalization and really strong and having zero emotions and being very selective about when they showed up and where they showed up and how they showed up. But that was a real blocker to having sort of relationships that felt authentic.
So when you lost that connection with your intuition, was your first thing, I should go to therapy, or like what was the process there?
Oh, that's a good question. The reason to go to therapy manifested in not having authentic relationships that felt well between them. So in my primary partnership, the fact that I couldn't say how I felt because I didn't know. And it would take me a couple of weeks to know what I had felt in the past. Like, it was such a delayed reaction. It was that breakdown and the challenge that brought to my primary relationships that pushed me towards therapy.
And what do you think that was? Was that burnout? Was it just you'd gotten flooded with input and now it was quiet and you couldn't connect? Like what was that? Was that how stress and burnout showed up for you?
Yeah, and I think underneath the stress and the burnout was fear. Like, I think stress and burnout are sort of downstream symptoms of an upstream, more fundamental issue. And I think that is fear. I think it is, for me, it was fear of being wrong, fear of failure, fear of not being enough, fear of being an imposter. And these are, of course, things that you hear from people pretty often in different lines of work. But I think that those then manifested in this, like, I just don't trust myself. And now I can't even hear myself because I haven't trusted myself for so long.
So that showed up after you'd been like very busy and very successful. Is
I
that
mean,
is
I
that
was
right?
very busy. I don't know if I would say, I mean, it's like, what does successful mean? Like,
Hmm.
what is success? I was alive. I had a paycheck, did a lot of personal
From the
things.
outside, others would have said you're successful, but you're right. You know what is success mean?
Yeah. Because I think about it now, and this was sort of something that I think what I really wanted to say today is that if I am not well in my work, then I don't consider it success.
In your work and in the rest of your life, right? It extends.
Yeah, well, and I should probably also say that, like, there isn't a big distinction, like, my life's work, which is like my work is all consuming, and I live, I work a lot, I work all the time, and I have a family, and I make, I live in a family life where I am doing my life's work. And so there aren't as many boundaries between those as
Right.
other people I expect do have. But it really, because I'm so integrated as a person between my work and my home and my life, it requires me to be well. I need to be well for my children and my partner and my investors. And so if I'm not well, then it is not success.
So we talked about how to define success. How do you define well? How do you know
How do I know if I'm
when you're
winning?
well? Yeah, yeah. What does being well mean?
Being well means being in balance. There's there's being in balance of what I'm eating, how I'm sleeping, how much exercise I'm getting. That's really like the basic building blocks of health from my perspective. Eat, sleep, exercise, and do those things regularly so that you have the discipline of self-care that is the bedrock for care of my company, care of my colleagues, care of my children, care of my partner. But it's that old, I don't know, people say it all the time, put on your own oxygen mask first. And so for me, being well is being able to execute on the things that I know keep me well, keep me healthy.
So you've got that foundational building blocks, eat well, sleep and move. Now, within that, if you're doing all that, are you always well?
No, no, because when you're running a startup, I mean, everybody knows we sign up for a marathon, right? Like, most startups are like a 20-year overnight success. Like, again, back to this concept of success, like, you have these big wins that everybody says, "Oh, look, that person, what a ride." And there's so much that came before that. It it often takes 20 years. Hopefully not in this case, but you know, we know we're on a marathon at any rate, even if it's 10. But there are intermittent times when you have to run hard and you have to go hard. And so you're going to sacrifice the sleep, you're going to sacrifice the emotional intimacy with your partner, you're going to eat that bag or case of potato chips or whatever it is. In my case it's probably Oreos, but you know, you're going to make those choices because you know you aren't operating in an optimal state where you can have the, perfect balance of self-discipline and the external forces are requiring you to push.
So how does stress show up in your life these days?
How does stress show up? I mean, my life is pretty stressful.
Yeah, like it shows up all the time.
It's like it's always a constant. Are you asking how does it manifest for me? I don't know, I really wanna stop biting my nails. So that to me is probably the most, like, everyday external facing thing. But that is a symptom of an internal need for some sort of release of something. And so, I think there's this sort of constant energy of like, no. And I think this fear that I'm talking about and this stress and this worry is something that actually keeps us sharper and has a function as a useful evolutionary role in us as humans. And so I don't think it's bad and I don't think I should eliminate it. But the problem is that it doesn't always like managing it is not always a perfect now it's not always a perfect balance, right? Sometimes it gets so strong and it takes over and then, I'm lying awake at 3 in the morning with anxiety eating my stomach and worrying about how the whole house is gonna fall down. So, I mean, I definitely have those days.
Yeah. Yeah, so if I didn't have anxiety at all, I wouldn't show up for work. Like, who cares? Like, my
Yeah.
patients and my bills and my
You feel that way too, right?
maybe if there was no anxiety, there'd be no energy to
Yeah.
compel me to be continuing to move forward, to hunt, to gather. So there's definitely a role for that, and it's when it kind of gets out of control. And, you've talked about the, nervous system compression cycle, which, I kind of love that idea. Yeah, so why don't you tell us about
Yeah, well,
your
so
ideas on
the
that?
way I think about entrepreneurship and the path of this journey is that we have we have compressed the cycles of highs and lows and peaks and valleys and ups and downs of this journey into just a more compressed timeline. And so I think for people who are not on this journey, who maybe live in a, at least I don't know because I don't live this way, but my impression is that many people have stable jobs and have steady incomes and have, you know, sometimes things are a little better and sometimes they're a little worse, and those things happen over the course of years. But I think those cycles happen over the course of weeks and certainly months, maybe weeks, and maybe even shorter time scales. I mean, I can say on it, like, those things sometimes are different, vastly different from one day to the next day consecutively. So I think that's what you're referring to, this sort of compression that
Yeah,
happens in entrepreneurship.
right, right. So periods of kind of compressed anxiety, stress, fear, worry, where it gets really hard, and then some opening up of that, and that can be like 4 times a day, 5 times a day.
Exactly.
Like it's not just day to day. It can be in the same day. You're having those moments. So it's what for high performing entrepreneurs. What do you think is uniquely challenging for their mental health? Is this part of it? Is there more?
I mean, I do think we each have our own set of conditions, our own selves that we're bringing to the table, our own nature, our own nurtured experience. And so I do think that this compressed timeline, this nervous system compression is common. I think how that manifests varies from one person to the next. I know for me, one of the manifestations is in anger, in that I get, I have a shorter fuse, and when I'm not in good balance, you know, I can I can just, I feel that starts at irritation and it quickly grows to something that's a lot hotter than irritation. And I don't think that's just limited to the entrepreneurial experience, though. I think I'm bringing that to the table as a piece of my makeup for my whole life. But I think it's in the entrepreneurial context, I think some of those things might be magnified and pressurized even more than they would be if I had sort of had chosen a different career path that wasn't quite so wavy.
So I mean, you've talking about the foundation of eat, move, sleep, therapy. What role did spirituality have to play in your life?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. It's complicated for me. It's complicated for me in that organized religion is a challenge to accept. I think many people are especially people in my line of work are questioning the dominant paradigm. And so organized religion is the dominant paradigm or has been the dominant paradigm. And I certainly grew up in, in that, at least with that surrounding me. Although my parents were quite innovative in some ways and interesting in some ways, and ended up taking us to a universal worship service for a number of years. But it wasn't something that I sort of spent much time or paid much attention to. And I am fortunate in that I have a wife who has a lot of spiritual and religious interest, and she pursued a degree in divinity. So she went and got a master's in divinity she did a joint degree between Hartford Theological Seminary and Union Theological Seminary. And in the course of her path, there was a need for us to pick a church in case she was going to pursue a path to ordination. And, we're in a great relationship where our objective is to say yes to each other when if we can, we say yes. And I think that's a great framework for being in partnership. Challenging, but also great. But I said yes to divinity school and she said yes to entrepreneurship and here we are. But so I think that has, pushed me in directions that I might not have otherwise gone on my own. But I don't necessarily have a tight set of beliefs, but I create the space as a result of these things to reflect. And I have a really smart brother-in-law who has said that it is the practice that is important. The beliefs are not what it's about, it is the practice. And so, I think that coupled with I've done yoga as one of my movements of choice for a long time, that I've been able to cultivate deeper spiritual awareness, deeper connection to more universal truth. And at this point in the journey that I'm on, my work is very purpose driven. Having that taproot to call on in finding the motivation to get out of bed, in addition to anxiety, I find that I do feel I'm living a purpose driven life, and having that spiritual connection um, is power.
Yeah, so meaning and purpose are uh, foundational aspects of flourishing, right? Of being well. So that's another foundational block to put in to the framework.
Absolutely, that's a great way to say that.
Yeah, yeah. So Catherine told me about your idea of riding the beast instead of the beast riding you.
Yeah. Well, it's a visual that makes sense, right? Like some days, I have been a horse lover and an equestrian and ridden all kinds of horses off and on for my whole life. I've never actually been ridden by a horse, just to be, but the analogy of, you know, sometimes it's perfect harmony and sometimes, it's you're just in lockstep and you just is everything is right. And then other days you just can't get it together. Like the rhythm isn't there, the connection isn't there, and you know, it's just broken. And so that is what I mean in terms of sometimes I'm riding the horse and sometimes it's just not going that way.
Yeah, so the riding the horse in harmony, that's like flow, right? That's the state that you feel at your best and you perform at your best and everything comes easy and time slows down and you're super productive. And some days you can't get anything right.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Um, so how do you get through those days? How do we get through those days?
Well, sometimes you want to just go back to bed and try again
That's
tomorrow.
right. Yeah.
Often in my sort of world, I have there are enough things that and dimensions of work that I need to do. There's always a list of execution things. There's often a set of management things, and then there's often a set of strategy things. And so there are a couple things that I can do where I can jump to different buckets, and then I have people in um, my my closer knit people. I have a co-founder. I have some advisors. I have a couple of employees, and I have several friends who, could fit in any of those buckets, or have been in those different buckets over time. So, sort of knowing how to move myself through, and having the sort of perspective to be able to do that, move myself to different buckets of work and bring in those alternate perspectives when it's just not flowing so that I can try to see things in a different way, or I can sort of break through something that's emotionally a blocker. You know, those are the kinds of techniques that I employ when I don't have when it's actually like my list is too long for me to like get back into bed.
Right. So what I think about is, I've got my structure to the day. I've got patients showing up. Doesn't matter if I spilled my coffee. Like I have to show up. But if I'm having a string of days, number one, there's an expectation that happens. Right. So it's not always going to be one that you're back, in flow all the time. You can expect that life on planet Earth is there's gravity, there's friction, and stuff's gonna break. On planet Earth, that's how it goes.
That's right.
But then if it's starting to extend past whatever period of time that things are getting heavy and grindy, and that's where you've got people to turn to.
Yeah. Sometimes I felt rich in those people, and this is one of those times when I feel rich in those people. But there have been times when I was not rich in those people um, on this journey. I think it'd be interesting what my answers would have been to this, to some of these questions 6 months ago, without the sort of resources that I have around me now.
And so having the people around you, and sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less. There's rarely zero. Even sometimes it can feel like there's nobody. But the second piece is like having the willingness and the ability to have the choice of connecting with someone else when you're kind of getting into the weeds there in your life, right? Because
There's yeah.
the worry is that you keep it all inside your head and you implode or explode. People die, and it could be a choice that you're not reaching out, but for some folks, they don't even really think of it as an option. It's not even in their consciousness that there's people for them.
I will tell you that this is so like entrepreneurship is so humbling in this way. I am the kind of person who likes to do it all myself and I like to have it all together and I like to present a particular picture to the world of being, you know, just I've got it all together. And I do. I mean, largely I do. But sometimes I don't. And when I'm doing a lot of new things that I haven't done before and I am learning, but I'm learning too slowly for my own comfort level and I feel like there's so much at risk and so much at stake. Going out and saying, like, I am a needy founder. Like using the word needy was something that I started maybe like 5 months ago, 4 months ago, and I hate that word. Like I hate the word needy, and I started using it because I found that opening up that vulnerability channel ended up bringing more good to me than I could have imagined.
So isn't it interesting, right? So the word needy has a connotation of, there's something wrong with you. You should be more independent, et cetera, et cetera. Having needs is normal, but we turn it into a weakness. But the surrender to saying, I have needs, I have times where I am needy, but just the ability to open up and share is helpful to you. And then to others, it allows them potentially to do the same.
Well, and it allows people to actually help because you have said, I need help.
Right.
And
Right.
they couldn't
I need
actually
help.
read my mind.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
didn't actually know that before. I said, I need help. And so just exploring very like from superficial, I need help with this spreadsheet to I need help understanding why, I'm lacking confidence to make a good sales pitch. Like there's a lot of levels of need that and a lot of dimensions to it that are just very humbling and require us, like me particularly, to look at things like confidence. I want to project this image of like very confident, of course I know what I'm doing and of course I know where we're going and that is rewarded. That is what is rewarded because when you're confident, other people around you can be confident. It's not just I mean, it's true about horses too. Like in interacting with horses, like if you are insecure, the horse is going to feel insecure because they're going to sense your insecurity and then they're not going to behave as well. If you are confident and clear as the leader and you are calm and direct in where you're going and what you're doing, the horse is going to in turn respond to that and be calm and clear and aligned with what you want to do. And so that sort of internal, when you have no idea what you're doing, you're trying 10 new things and learning a bunch of stuff all at once, like centering on the confidence in the unknown, like being confident in the unknown is like that to me is like the core work of being an entrepreneur.
Interesting. So it makes me think of a couple of things. Number one, Dan Sullivan, who's the founder of Strategic Coach, he has a concept called the four C's. He says when you have a new project you're working on, everybody wants to get to the fourth C, which is confidence. And you'll study and you'll learn and you'll talk and you'll try to do everything you can to kind of get the confidence, but there's no shortcut to confidence. You've got to go through the other C's, the other three C's. So the first C is really commitment. You commit to this path. The second C is courage. And what he says is courage never ever feels good. And then you start to get more capable, and then you finally get to the confidence piece. But that sense of needing the courage that doesn't feel good and really you can't just procrastinate and learn more to get confident. And the other piece is, what does the leader need when they're in that courage state? And it's really kind of the vision. And if you've got a vision of future that's different than what it is today, and you can envision several pathways towards that, that's how this occupational psychologist Ben Hardy, he defines that as hope. You know, a vision that's different than today with various pathways that you can get there. And then if you're kind of sure that you can make that happen, you don't know how, you're not like that's inspiration, right? And that's where you have, the vision and the hope and the inspiration. I know I've got a team of people who can get us there. No idea how it's going to happen, and I'm still in the courage state, right? This is still kind of feeling really scary and uncomfortable. But yeah, you put those two together.
This is wonderful. I really
Hmm.
appreciate you sharing the framework with me of how some other people have thought about this journey and put some sort of words to it because again it's not linear, right? There are like vision and inspiration. There is a north star, absolutely, but the how we get there, there are a number of smaller goals in the midst, and for each of them I think the commitment, the courage, the capability before the confidence, like I could feel that in bites of things, and none of this is linear. And so, and then if you have 3 projects going on at a time trying to solve for a couple different things, then you're in the different states and you're as you're sort of progressing.
And not to mention a family and horses and
Yeah.
everything else, right, in
I
your
have
life.
no horses. I'm unhorsed at this moment, which I think is for the best, just given the time commitment. But I've learned so much from my relationships with horses about
Hmm.
myself and about managing myself and about the nature of existence. And so I do I do really deeply appreciate that and love to have them in my life at some point again. But the kids are more, the kids are more important these days.
Right. So Noah, is there anything else on your mind, or where can people find you?
Um, I'm sure I have plenty on my mind, but more that people need to hear today. Yes. So my website is goodbread.net. We're making small business microloans, and I'm excited to talk to people who are enthusiastic about this topic. Yeah. And so I think that's what I've got.
No, great. So keep up the good work and what you bring to the world. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. Thanks for the opportunity.